When I think about Florida, yeah, sure, there's the beaches, Mickey Mouse, that heat, man, the heat. But there's also one thing that stands out as quintessentially Florida, and that's key lime pie. Now, picture this. It's just a warm day down in the Keys and the sun's out. You probably got a cold drink in your hand, and right in front of you, this perfectly chilled, creamy slice of key lime pie. Tart, sweet, just dang delicious. But what if I told you this iconic pie that is all about the Florida Keys might not have come from Florida at all? Yeah, I know. Hold on, that sounds wild, right? It's like saying gators aren't really from the Everglades, which don't worry, they totally are. But seriously, today we're diving deep into the surprising, kind of mysterious, and honestly pretty funny history of key lime pie. So get comfy, maybe even grab a slice if you got one, and let's jump right into it. Key lime pie. Is it really Florida's pie, or are we all just believing a tall tale that started somewhere else? Well, turns out there's a lot more to this little pie than just condensed milk and limes.
Welcome to Old Florida Now, where we uncover the rich history and hidden stories of the Sunshine State. Each episode will explore the people, places, and events that shaped Florida's past. Let's dive in.
All right, so let's go way back, like 1800s Key West back. We're talking sponge fishermen, wild seas, and a whole lot of, well, probably not what you'd expect from dessert history. So the story goes, and it's a bit of a legend at this point. Key lime pie first started with the sponge fishermen, or hookers, as they were called locally. These guys were out at sea for long stretches, trying not to get scurvy, which, meant limes were a key ingredient in their survival toolkit. They'd mix lime juice with eggs and condensed milk because fresh milk wasn't a thing out there. And sometimes they'd throw it over stale Cuban bread. Not exactly what we picture today, right? But back then it worked. They didn't even bake it. They just let it set in the sun like some weird sun-cooked pie. Now, here's where it gets good. Eventually, these rugged fishermen brought their limey concoction back home, and the wives, who I gotta say probably had a bit more culinary finesse, fancied it up. They threw it in a proper pie crust, and boom, key lime pie starts taking shape. But here's the twist. The real credit for making key lime pie, what we know today, well, a lot of people say it goes to a woman named Aunt Sally. She worked for Florida's first millionaire, William Curry, at his big, fancy mansion in Key West. And supposedly she took the fisherman's rough and ready pie recipe, polished it up, and started serving it to the Curry family. Now, whether she actually invented it or just made it popular is up for debate, but she's the one that gets the credit in most stories. But, what's history without a bit of controversy? Some historians, and I'm not saying I believe this, but it's out there, claim the pie could have actually started in New York. I know, that just doesn't sit right, does it? More on that later, though, because for now, key lime pie is firmly planted in the Florida Keys. So that's the basic rundown. Fishermen, condensed milk, and a mysterious Aunt Sally at the center of it all. But there's a lot more to uncover as we dig deeper into how this pie went from a humble fisherman's fix to Florida's official pie. All right, so let's talk about the key ingredient of key lime pie. And yeah, that pun's intentional. Key lime, these little guys are different. If you've never seen one, they're way smaller than your average lime. Like, think golf ball size, but even tinier sometimes. And they're not that bright green we usually think of when we picture limes. They actually turn more yellow when they're ripe. But here's the thing, they pack a punch. Key limes are super tart, more so than your usual Persian limes, which is why they give that unmistakable zing to the pie. But here's a wild fact. Key limes, they're not even native to Florida. They came from Southeast Asia originally, probably brought over by Spanish explorers in the 1500s. So Florida kind of adopted them as their own over time. No, they grew like crazy in the Florida Keys, hence the name, right? But In the early 1900s, a major hurricane came through and wiped out a bunch of the key lime groves. After that, commercial production in the Keys never really recovered. And nowadays, most key limes are actually imported from places like Mexico. Yeah. So when you're eating a key lime pie today, it's likely not even Florida grown limes in there. I know it feels a little like you're being lied to, right? But the flavor, that sharp, tart, citrusy flavor that's still the heart of what makes this pie what it is. And there's a reason key limes work so well in the pie. They're more acidic than regular limes, which cuts through the sweetness of the condensed milk. That balance of sweet and tart is exactly why people can't get enough of it. It's like this perfect little symphony of flavors in every bite. So even though key lime trees aren't exactly thriving in Florida anymore, the flavor has become such an iconic part of the state's identity. You've got to hand it to those little limes. They've definitely left their mark. All right, here's where things get complicated. So you're sitting there thinking key lime pie, totally a Florida thing, right? Well, not everyone agrees. There's a bit of a food fight. No, not the messy kind, over where key lime pie actually came from. Now, the most accepted story, especially down in the Keys, is that it originated with Aunt Sally in Key West, like we talked about. But, and this is a big but, there's another theory that throws a wrench into that whole story. So in 2017, food historian Stella Parks, who, let me tell you, loves to stir things up, she suggested that key lime pie might actually have originated in New York. Yeah, New York, like the home of bagels and cheesecake. Her argument is that the key lime pie we know today is almost identical to a dessert called magic lemon cream pie that was created by Borden Dairy back in the 1930s. The recipe called for sweetened condensed milk, lemon juice, egg yolks, and it even had a graham cracker crust. And what Parks says happened is that when this pie made its way down to Florida, bakers in the Keys swapped out the lemons for local key limes, and boom, key lime pie was born. Now, obviously, people in Florida, especially in Key West, we're not thrilled about that theory. I mean, can you imagine your beloved state pie from New York? It's like saying Philly cheesesteaks actually came from Jersey. It's a scandal. But there's more to it. Some folks like David Sloan, who's the co-founder of the Key Lime Festival, yes, there's a festival. He argues the opposite. He says Borden actually got the recipe from a Key West baker, and they just made it with lemons because, lemons were more common outside Florida. So who's right? Honestly, no one's really sure. It's one of those food mysteries that might never get fully solved. But the fun part is this debate is what makes key lime pie so interesting. It's not just a dessert. It's got a little drama behind it, whether it's from New York or Key West. One thing's for sure, it's become a symbol of Florida, and that's not changing anytime soon. All right, so by now we've covered the fisherman, Aunt Sally, and even that whole New York theory. But let's talk about how key lime pie went from this practical, simple treat to the cultural phenomenon it is today. Back in the early days, we're talking late 1800s and early 1900s, key lime pie was still pretty much a working class dessert. Fishermen, their families, they'd whip it up with whatever they had on hand. It wasn't, fancy or anything. But here's where it gets interesting. Once Aunt Sally started making it at the Curry Mansion, the pie started to become a bit more mainstream. Key West tourists began trying it, and soon enough, local restaurants caught on. Before long, key lime pie was popping up all over the place, even being sold at roadside stands. It went from a simple hooker pie, yes, that was the nickname for it among the locals, to a must-try dessert if you were visiting the Keys. Now, flash forward to the 1950s and 60s, and key lime pie was basically everywhere in Florida. Tourists would come down, get a taste, and bring the recipe back home with them. Restaurants and diners all over the state, and eventually the country started putting their own spins on it. It wasn't just a regional thing anymore. It was national. And get this, key lime pie even got its own day in the sun when Florida declared it the official state pie in 2006. Yep, it beat out every other dessert to claim the top spot. I mean, can you even imagine Florida without key lime pie? It's part of the state's identity at this point. But the pie didn't stop there. You've got frozen key lime pie on a stick, which, by the way, is still super popular with tourists walking down Duval Street in Key West. And then you've got key lime pie flavored cocktails, marinades, even ice cream. The flavors have kind of taken on a life of their own, inspiring all these crazy twists and variations. Some chefs even play around with adding jalapenos or bacon, making it savory. Talk about versatility, right? And it's funny to think about how this little pie, which started as a way to use up leftover ingredients and prevent scurvy, became this massive cultural icon. And here's a fun fact for you. There's actually a key lime festival in Key West every year where people compete to make the biggest, most creative pies. If that's not a cultural evolution, I don't know what is. So let's talk about the endless ways people have played around with key lime pie recipes. I mean, at its core, it's super simple. Key lime juice, sweetened condensed milk, egg yolks, and a graham cracker crust. But you know people, we can't help but tinker with a good thing. Now, the classic recipe is pretty much the same everywhere you go in Florida. Smooth, creamy filling, that perfect balance of tart and sweet. But, you know, there are so many ways to switch it up. Some folks go lighter on the condensed milk to make it a little less sweet and more tart. Others might pile on the whipped cream instead of meringue, which, if you ask me, is a whole debate on its own. And then there's the crust. Most of the time, it's that buttery graham cracker crust we all know and love, but some people experiment with everything from shortbread to ginger snaps just to add a little more flavor. I mean, can you really go wrong when you've got that key lime filling? Probably not. But then you get into the wild variations. Like, did you know some chefs out there are adding jalapenos to their key lime pie? Yeah, to give it a spicy kick, or even bacon to make it more savory. That's a whole new level of experimentation. David Sloan, who wrote the Key Lime Pie Cookbook, swears by the savory versions. It's like this totally different take on the dessert where you get that salty, sweet combo. And it doesn't stop there. Key lime flavor has inspired everything from ice cream to cocktails. I mean, if you're down in Key West, you've probably seen or maybe even tried this key lime pie on a stick. It's literally frozen and dipped in chocolate, perfect for walking around in that heat. And let's not forget the drinks. Key lime martinis, margaritas, and even key lime daiquiris are all on the menu. One bar down in Key West, General Horseplay, does a key lime pie cocktail that apparently uses this floral almond syrup orgeat to give it a bit of complexity. It's like a slice of pie in liquid form. How fun is that? So, yeah, while the classic key lime pie will always have a special place in our hearts and stomachs, people keep finding new ways to play around with it, whether it's savory, frozen, or sipped through a straw. This pie is a constant evolution, and honestly, I'm here for it. All right, time to hit you with some fun facts and trivia about key lime pie, because who doesn't love some random tidbits to impress your friends with, right? First up, did you know that in 2006, key lime pie became Florida's official state pie? Yeah, they actually had to make it official. Like it wasn't already the most Florida thing ever. The state legislature passed a resolution, so it's on the books. Key lime pie is the pie of Florida. I mean, move over pecan pie, right? And speaking of big things, in 2005, to celebrate Florida's bicentennial, they baked a 13-foot wide key lime pie. 13 feet. I can't even imagine the size of the graham cracker crust on that thing. Here's another fun one. If you've ever walked down Duval Street in Key West, you might have seen or even tried key lime pie on a stick. Yep, they freeze it, dip it in chocolate, and it's basically like an ice cream bar, but way better. It's one of those tourist must-tries. You'll see people just strolling down the street, chocolate dripping down their hands. And get this. There's actually a key lime festival down in Key West every year. They have pie eating contests, cook-offs, even a competition to see who can make the biggest pie. It's just this giant celebration of all things key lime, definitely on my bucket list. So there you have it. Next time you're enjoying a slice of that sweet, tangy goodness, you've got a few fun facts to go along with it. And who knows, maybe you'll even make it to the Key Lime Festival one day. Just don't forget the napkins. All right, so let's wrap things up by talking about the enduring legacy of key lime pie. Because honestly, it's more than just a dessert at this point, right? It's like woven into the identity of Florida. I mean, think about it. Key lime pie started as this humble, practical dish just a way for fishermen to use up limes and condensed milk. And now it's everywhere. It's in diners, upscale restaurants, tourist shops. You can even get key lime flavored everything from candles to body wash. It's wild how far this little pie has come. And it's not just here in Florida either. You can find key lime pie all over the country, probably even the world, on menus from New York to LA. People who've never even set foot in Florida know what key lime pie is. It's like it's transcended its regional roots, you know? But I think what really makes it special, what keeps it enduring, is that it's still got this sense of place. You can eat a slice anywhere, but if you're eating it in the Keys on a warm day with that sea breeze, it's just different. There's a kind of nostalgia, or maybe a sense of Florida's history baked into every bite. And despite all the variations and debates about its origins, the one thing everyone can agree on, key lime pie represents a little slice of Florida's soul. It's got that balance of sweet and tart, smooth and zesty, kind of like Florida itself. So whether it's your first slice or your 100th, key lime pie's legacy is alive and well, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And that's a wrap on this episode of Old Florida Now. I'm your host, Bo Carter, and I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the sweet, tangy world of key lime pie. Florida's official dessert with a history just as rich as its flavor. If you liked what you heard, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And hey, if you've got your own key lime pie stories or favorite spots to grab a slice, I'd love to hear about them. You can reach out to us on Instagram at Old Florida Now. Until next time, keep exploring the Sunshine State one bite of history at a time. Thanks for listening to Old Florida Now. Stay sweet, Florida.
Thanks for listening to Old Florida Now. Stay tuned for more stories from the Sunshine State's past. Until next time.